And in 5, 4, 3, 2. Hello and welcome back to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. This is episode 62. Devin joins me today from Chicago to talk about all kinds of stuff. But first, Devin, it's been a little while. What have you been up to, man?
Oh my goodness, lots of shooting. Starting work at a new broadcast station that specializes in internet content. I don't know. It's been learning more about broadcast workflow, broadcast engineering, and all that kind of stuff. Along with, of course, the mountain of editing that I always have in front of me somehow that I could never get ahead of.
Egads, you're going to lock yourself at the studio in one of those dark, scary rooms with a bunch of Macs around you, editing continuously as footage comes in through the only light source in your room.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna get like a permanent blue tan from all the monitors. It's gonna be crazy.
On my end, guys, you probably heard last episode, but came back from the festivals. Great time. Sold a crap load of feature-length films. Discussed that in depth with Mitch last episode, but really fun. Still getting comments and reviews on our feature-length films. So thanks for buying those if you bought one, and thanks for saying hello and coming to the booth. That was grand of you. Now, on that note, I think it is time for the news. Time for the news. First thing we got on the list here, and this is actually something I am fairly excited about. I think Devin is too, in fact. Hard drives are not always the thing that we jump up and down about, but man, have solid state drives really come a long way in the last couple of years. Right now, Samsung has announced the new 950 Pro. This guy is faster than the previously released Intel 750 series. If you're not familiar with those, go check them out. They come in a 400 gig, 800 gig, and I believe a 1.2 terabyte flavor. These guys from Samsung are going to be cheaper, a little bit faster. We're talking 2.5 gig reads and 1.5 gig writes. And the price is really compelling here. We're talking about $350 for a 512 gig model and $200 for the 256 gig model. These are fast. They are fairly large capacity, and they're M.2 form factor. Now, Devin, what do you think? Is that kind of in your wheelhouse for a price?
It is mind-blowing. Yeah, I know. Even though that's you can get a 250 these days for maybe $80 or $100, depending on how much performance you want out of it. I think that $200 is completely reasonable for these kind of speeds. It's absolutely ridiculous, and I wouldn't be surprised if in one way or another these are somewhat artificially inflated prices just to get some of that older stock still going out the door. Because $530 for a 512, that's a great price. You can stick both of those together, do a RAID 0, and have speeds that no computer could ever touch for less than $700. So it's definitely one of those that I'm looking into. I can't wait till they actually start putting these though in like SSDs as that 2.5 millimeter form factor, whatever, the laptop size drives. Because I use a ton of those. I spit those in and out of my computer all the time for editing different projects and all kinds of stuff. So while the M.2, is it called, standard is great for your laptops and like DJ's laptop of having multiple hard drives for caching and all that kind of stuff. I can't wait till I can purchase this in kind of a more standard configuration, or I guess a larger configuration, so I can use it on my own computer.
Well, there's a little bit of problem there because SATA is the limiting factor for an SSD like this. If you have it in SATA form factor, you're going to be like bottlenecked basically to about 600, maybe 700 megs at the max. I would say probably closer to 600 would be
probably closer to 600. Yeah.
Yeah. So with something like this, the amount of speed and it's just, but it's crazy. How do you hook that up?
No, but you can't buy SSDs right now that'll hit that limit. And I feel like with these coming out at this size, they're going to start coming out with SSDs that just perform right at 6 gigabit. And chances are be a little bit cheaper because they don't need to have the high-end performance. If it makes sense, slightly over-engineering the drive speed so that you can maximize the throughput on the channel.
Slightly? Come on. This is like triple, quadruple SATA speeds. Now, I will say, for those of you buying new motherboards, I don't know about putting these into a RAID 0 configuration because M.2 is a different beast altogether than SATA, but a bunch of newer motherboards all come with a PCIe M.2 capable slot on the motherboard. I have a gigabyte board in my system right now that has 2 slots that support up to the 80mm length. And I believe this is the 2280 standard, which is the 80mm length M.2 SSD.
But you don't necessarily need a new motherboard to take advantage of this either. They do make adapters you can pop in the PCI slots, because 16x PCI? Isn't that like 3 gigabytes per second?
This only requires 4x PCIe, so you're not really gonna beat it up too hard. You'll still have room for like a graphics card as far as your
but you can upgrade an older motherboard. Just because your motherboard doesn't come with these form factors, I think they're probably what, $20, $25 a Newegg. You can get an adapter that'll do an M.2 to PCI and get whatever performance you can get out of this. Though I know there can be compatibility issues sometimes depending on the motherboard.
Booting maybe.
Well, yeah, if you want to boot from it. But for me, I feel like this is kind of specialized. I wouldn't use this for an OS drive. I'd use this purely as like, hey, I've got 8 video tracks that I want to do real-time cutting with. That's where I'd use something with this.
Now, the speed on something like this has kind of got me thinking, like in 5 years, maybe 4 years down the line, are we going to sit there and look back and be like, oh man, all I got are these old, slow SSDs in my system. If only I could get a newer, SATA drive, not a SATA, but a new, faster SSD like this in my system. It's kind of sad, really, because right now my setup is a 1 terabyte SSD for my main drive and 1 terabyte SSD for my editing drive. And that works really well. But when I look at the speeds on this thing versus the speeds on my SSDs, it's just like, it's night and day. This is gorgeous right now. And this question actually came up on the YouTube comment section on the last episode. Someone was asking about what they should get for a 4K editing system. And I gave them my specs and kind of told them where I was at. And I'm running an i7 4790. I've got 32 gigs of RAM. I've got a Titan Black GPU in here. I've got a number of SSDs. And I'm able to edit 4 streams of 4K footage at half resolution without chugging and playing back in real time. If I go to full resolution, that's fine. But as soon as I add any sort of color grading effects or transitions or anything, it'll start to chug as well. And I'm not 100% sure if the bottleneck is in processing or
what codec?
This is H.264. So
no, that's just H.264, man.
I should probably upgrade my CPU to like an octa-core or something like that. But at half resolution, I can handle it no problem. The Mercury playback engine and my Titan Black are enough juice to take care of that. So for me, that's fine. But if you're looking for the ultimate system, I mean,
the ultimate system,
this is overkill.
This is slightly overkill. Let me put it this way. I think this is kind of like SSDs is 1080p in terms of like, how much better it is than the previous generation. And this is like 4K. Like, it's better on so many accounts, color depth, everything else. But 4K, 6K, 8K, none of that's going to beat us jumping from standard def to 1080p. And I think even people who grow up with 1080p jumping to 4K, considering viewing distances and everything else, is not that significant a jump. It's a lot of power and effort for a little bit more quality to get a little bit closer to, some kind of idealistic version of perfect. And as opposed to like SSDs, that's something where you can pop it in an old laptop and like it'll bring your old laptop back to life, and it'll be like fast at browsing the web again and all kinds of stuff. Where getting an even faster SD like this, it's only gonna be noticeable by people like us. Like, like if I show 4K to my parents or, my sister, they're not going to notice the difference between 1080p and 4K. I will, but they won't necessarily, because they don't exactly know what they're looking at. And I feel like these kind of drive speeds is up in that area where SSDs was a big improvement for like every computer user everywhere. And these this solid state memory here is just basically for people like us who are like, oh, we could never get a drive that's too fast. We could always use something faster.
So my 1 TB editing drive is the infamous 840 Evo, which had a bunch of firmware and software problems. And if you're familiar with the way that works, it's a SLC cache over TLC memory, which is the triple level cell setup. And the TLC is a bit slower to access, but it has like I want to say like a 20 gig or 12 gig buffer of SLC memory that's constantly buffering from the drive. So for the most part, it keeps up with everything fine. But I have found that it is sometimes the bottleneck when I have very, very large projects. It may be that I would be better served to spend my money on a 850, which does not have that SLC caching setup and instead is all MLC memory. But something like this is truly attractive because then it's like I could throw everything at it. And then the only thing that's going to limit my access to video footage played back real time is going to be the ability for it to be processed on the fly, which would be CPU bound and, of course, graphics card bound. And I've only run a few minor tests. I don't really pay super attention to it. But doing 4 streams from the GH4, you're right. That is a ton of compression. But with a Titan Black,
no, you know what? And to that point, it sounds weird, right? But I noticed something. I feel like I'm not the only one because Linus, the Linus Media Group posted a video about their workflow where they have 8 or so editors working off of a like RAID of like 50 SSD drives or something like that on a 10 gigabit network. And what they noticed is that H.264, no matter what they do and they scrub the timeline, the performance is crap, even though they're all running around with these octa-core i7s and everything else. And I don't know if they're Titan Blacks, but I'm pretty sure they're 980s at least, or 990s or something like that. But they've got all this hardware and all this speed, and the timeline performance is crap. And so they've actually switched their workflow so that when they ingest media, it automatically gets encoded to they tried like DNX. I think they ended up deciding on Cineform. But when they do something like Cineform, which is not a temporal codec, so it's, like all intra codec or whatever it's called. I don't know. There's too many names in there.
AL-I or
yeah. But when they switch to that, even though the file sizes are huge, timeline performance is way better. And they're way faster at editing and working with the clips. So it's one of those where I've noticed myself, I've taken my H.264 clips, and I mean, I could have done Cineform, but I didn't really care. I converted them over to MPEG-2 just as a proxy for editing, because just about anything can chug through MPEG-2 because it's such a light codec, even though it is temporal. So I mean, there's part of it I feel like is this is an Adobe thing with the way that Adobe is taking in H.264, and it's brilliant that it can do it and it can edit it very well in RAW and not crash. But I think that there's some limitations that if you use a better codec that's built for editing, you're going to see better performance. So all my multicam editing, I always proxy because, I mean, I don't have as big of a system as you do, DJ, but even 4 cameras, H.264 at 1080p, my i7 struggles with it. So
yeah, I'm not gonna waste my time. I mean, no offense, like, that's a good point, but I'm not gonna spend hours and hours transcoding before I start editing. Just it's not the way I roll.
It's not. It's not worth your time.
You're absolutely right, though. Back in the i7 920 days, I had an HV20, I believe, which shot 1080p on tape, or maybe it's HV40. I don't remember. But the point is that shot it on DV tape, and the output was MPEG. So the MPEG footage from that camera, once you got it ingested via FireWire, which is a pain in the butt because it's real time, don't do that. It sucks. But the point is I could work on that in an i7 920 with 24 gigs of RAM and like not have any issue at all. As soon as I threw H.264 at it 1080p, it was like I hit a brick wall. I could barely handle anything. And I think these are the days of CS4. So it's not that many generations ago, but it was tough.
You're totally right. And I think that part of it is it comes down to Adobe, and probably comes down to something with the codec, because the people at Adobe are smart. But even if you have the world's biggest dual Xeon computer, whatever, and you have amazing IO speed, H.264 is still sluggish, and it's still hard to work real time if you're going to do multiple layers or be really heavy on your effects. And so it's either some kind of limitation with the codec playback, or it's a limitation of Adobe and the way that they get performance out of H.264. But that's something I've noticed is like, my computer will stutter and I'll watch the CPU do absolutely nothing. And my drive, of course, is doing nothing because H.264, it's like a 100 megabyte clip. What does it matter? So it's one of those things where I don't know where the bottleneck is, but I feel like it's not in the hardware. It has to be something with the coding, either the software or that. But I've never heard of anything editing H.264 faster than Adobe. I hear they all basically edit at about the same speed. They have the same performance on the timeline. So it could just be a limit of the codec. And, maybe H.265 will be way better for in terms of multi-core rendering and all that kind of stuff.
So much issues with codecs. And then, it's extra disappointing. I was reading up on the Sony FS5 today, and, it's using the XAVC. So basically H.264 encoding as well with like a slightly higher bit rate. Come on, guys, give me something new.
Yeah.
Give me some better flavor, yo. All right, moving on down the line here. Snapseed. We wanted to talk about this just a little bit. Google's native photo editing app now is able to handle RAW. This isn't the biggest deal in the world, but it is really handy for those of you with cell phones trying to work on your footage. Now, good ways to get raw footage into your camera. That's the part where I get kind of caught up with this. If you think about editing raw photos on your phone, Snapseed supports DNG format, so you have to convert whatever camera you're using to DNG. Is there a way, Devin, do you know, to do that in your phone?
Not that I know of. I've never heard of any way to do a DNG convert.
I'm going to tell you the way that I use Snapseed. And actually, I was just playing around with this before Devin put it in the show notes. Really interesting for me because I basically have Google Photos running in the background, uploading all my raw files to the cloud and storing everything, organizing it, making it really easy to sort through. Now, I can actually go to my Google Photos app on my phone and download the DNG files because I convert via Lightroom and do quick editing and post stuff in that manner. So for me, that's fairly handy, but I've also been falling into, kind of this workflow where I'm using Polar, that thing we talked about before, which there's a Chrome app, there's an Android app, and I believe there's even just a plain Jane standalone Windows app available for that, and it does handle DNG files as well. So for me, I kind of feel like that is the way to go. Have your photos stored somewhere else. Use Lightroom when you need to perform heavy tasks, but if you're just dumping like 20 pictures of your friends or something like that, maybe that's the way to go.
Do you know if the Photoshop Express for Android or iOS has like the wide RAW support that Photoshop does, or is that just DNG only?
You know what? I have yet to test it. I know I should.
You own a Creative Cloud. Just download it, man.
It's on my list, but it's like the learning curve. And I'm not 100% sure. Is it available for Android? Because I know it's available for iPad and iOS devices, but I haven't actually looked to see if it's available for Android.
Adobe Photoshop Express, let me see, I was trying to see when it was last updated. I like looking at that stuff. February 13th, 2015 was the last time it was updated. Has about 10 million installs.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Anyway, Snapseed, my complaints real quick are the touch interface is a pain in the butt, man. I'm not very capacitive. I don't know if anybody really wants to get nitty gritty on that. But for some reason, I have dry hands and my fingers don't intricately work with touchscreens very well. So trying to get the thing to flip up and, give me access to all the regular editing stuff. And then it's sort of this not very convenient scroll method of working through your raw files. So you have to kind of scroll up and down for shadow contrast, anything like that. If you want to do any curve adjustments, you're kind of thumbing through a bunch of up and down things. Whereas the Polar setup is more, it's more like Lightroom. You have your pane on the side, you have your image in the middle, and then you have all of your adjustments on the side. I like that format better than I do Snapseed, but give it a try. Really interesting. Devin,
it's free.
Yeah, it is
so
free.
You might as well try it. I mean, come on, you can't beat that price. It comes from Google, so it's going to run well if you have an Android device, and it's free. So by all means, it's worth trying. And I think it's one of those things where Adobe hasn't done anything to like step out and say, hey, we're really, besides like they have YouTube, which is distribution, and they add a few creative tools to it. but they've never like ever really been serious in like, we want to take over professional photography, we want to get into that market or something like that. But it's interesting that Google's just like slowly building better and better products at media creation, not necessarily in the video department because the YouTube is still pretty lacking, but they're really moving towards cloud versions of editing your content, because of course that's where their money is all up in the cloud. And so it's interesting to see them slowly like add these major features and improvements to their software, rather quietly too. They don't make a video or make a big boast about it, but they kind of slowly are building better and better products. And so I wonder if they're kind of interested in that market. Not that I ever think that they would, get near touching Adobe or anything like that within the next 10 years, but it's one of those where it's kind of interesting because I think they really, I feel like they're fighting Apple and Microsoft on two fronts in terms of like trying to take over Office and trying to take over like, kind of light media creation, like storing your photos and like chatting with your friends and everything else. Because iMessage and everything else, that was all kind of Apple's territory, iMovie, iPhoto. And then, Office was Microsoft's territory. And I kind of feel like they're both creeping into that market share, being like, hey, we're here too.
What's really frustrating, though, about Google's approach is it's not very unified. And just looking right here, so we have Snapseed, and Snapseed has all of these editing capabilities. But here is a picture from Google Photos, and let me go back to this so you can see the information on it. So this was shot with a Canon 5D. It's converted over to DNG, and I click the edit here, and all I have are these super basic, like, oh, you want to make your photo look like it's on Mars. Oh, you want to,
right?
What? Great.
And there's,
and I can add a little bit of vignette, and I can, change the color a little bit.
There's a pop slider.
Yeah, great. Like just what I wanted. I want to make this pop. Whoa! What is that even doing? This is just like really okay. So you have these features, you have this stuff.
Well, and that's not even taking advantage of the raw part. Like it's opening a raw file, but since you can't change really exposure or like color temperature or any complicated color math, I'm like, that looks like they just took the JPEG 8-bit JPEG tools and slapped them on top of a raw photo. And I'm like, well, that's yeah. So it would be nice. You're right. It's part of it too. Is I feel like that it's just very diverse. There's lots of different people in many different areas who don't communicate, who just work on their own projects, and they do one thing and they do it really well, kind of an idea. But you're right. I think that Google, that's the next step, is Google start to bring it all together and merge it all together, which they've been doing for a long time. Like the Google Plus and the YouTube thing went terrible and all that kind of stuff. But I think they're trying to work on bringing it all together. And once that starts to really click, I mean, who knows how much power Google will have at that point if they own all your documents and all your personal photos and everything else. Jeez.
Well, I'm all in. I use
I
use Chrome for everything. I love the notifications. What's great is they scan my email, and then I get little like Chrome updates that say, hey, you've got a flight tomorrow at whatever time. And
I love that stuff.
Here's how to get there. Here's some recommendations on where to stay when you get there. Those sorts of things are super handy, but I want it all to be kind of streamlined so I can just drop stuff into my Google Now and have it all work together. When I open up a raw photo, I want to be able to do the editing that I want to do. I want Docs. I want Google Keep to work the way I think it should so that I can, write notes and it'll show up in Google Now. But instead, they're all kind of their little fiefdoms separated from each other, and none of them work together. And it's just really frustrating for me. Now, what's not frustrating for me is that I finally got my PayPal problem sorted out with Robocam. You guys remember me talking in the last episode, I was trying to buy a copy of Robocam, and somehow I got locked out of purchasing that. I don't know exactly what happened there, but I got a copy of it, started playing around with it today, have had zero luck on Windows 10.
Really?
But I did get it working on Windows 7. And so with Windows 7, I was able to control my Panasonic LX100 and my GH4. Pretty interesting, the ability to start and stop recording on both cameras simultaneously, seeing a view of both of those. Now, I am actually using, and I don't know if I can show this very well, if you look over there somewhere, it's the same router that they show in their demos. That is the Asus AC68, I believe. And the Asus AC68 is a beautiful, like $150 router. So I may be experiencing this better than some. They do recommend an AC router. Devin, what do you think? Like the practical applications for me would be interviews, and multicam shoots where I don't have enough people to run cameras and I could use the zoom feature. But can you think of any other applications for something like this?
You know what? I feel like the basic app that comes with the Panasonic cameras, which was pretty limited in the GH3. It was still really nice to see them in that, but the GH4 they did way better in terms of remote control, remote viewing, and everything else. I feel like that is like the one niche where this kind of fits. Is it's your is running a 2-camera shoot by yourself. I mean, as well as double checking recording or something like that. To me, most of the time it feels like it's a little too much hassle than it's worth in terms of trying to set up. I mean, just because you're talking about problems with Windows 10, which has been in beta and it's been out for a while. And I'm not saying every developer in the world should have, already be set up and working fine with Windows 10, but like, I don't know, the software should at least be able to open in Windows 10. So that's a game-breaking bug right there that hasn't been fixed on an operating system that's been free beta for developers, to sit there and test out for a long time. So I like the idea. I like where it's going. I think it's good for the price. It's just one of those things that I really couldn't see myself using just because most of the time it's not that difficult to jump between the two. If you're in a situation where you've got something up on a jib or something like that, and most of the work you're doing is remote with your camera, then sure. But most of that, there's a better way to remotely control your camera, usually through something like the LANC port or something like that, or maybe through a grip relocator like we talked about a few weeks ago. But there's usually, I always like kind of something more physical in a way of syncing up 2 cameras and like having both record at the same time and unrecord and stuff. And I've done that a few times where I've plugged in little remotes or used IR remotes to set cameras off. So it's one of those that I like this. But it right now, unless like really get over, making it easier to use, it's one of those that I'm not sure it's really worth it for me. I mean, it does say on their website they only currently support Windows 7 and Windows 8.
Yeah.
So
that was the issue. It wasn't actually that the software wouldn't start up; it was logging into it. You have to access the network, and then it shows you all the computers on the network. And I was able to access any of the systems that were running Windows 7. I don't have any currently that are running Windows 8.1. And I couldn't log in for whatever reason to the home network associated with Windows 10. So it may be like a security issue that they've set up in Windows 10 that is blocking it. Now,
yeah,
I got spoiled with the old remote because I used to use the RC1 remote for Canon cameras because you could IR blast like 3 cameras simultaneously and get everything to start rolling at this roughly the same time. And it was super handy, and you press once with the switch turned one way to focus, and then you press again to start recording. And I used to use that all the time. I still do on my Canon 5D Mark III and my 6D, but with the GH4, you don't really have anything as convenient, or I haven't found anything as convenient. So using the app is fine and it's great. Okay, good. I can frame myself, but I could do that with the
Panasonic
screen that flips around anyway. Why do I need?
Oh yeah, and the screen.
Why do I need the app? I just want to be able to point at the camera and start recording and stop recording. But with this, at least like use your cell phone. It heats up, A, because you're using Wi-Fi. You have to keep the screen on, B. So now you're going in the worst possible battery usage scenario for a cell phone. You eat through your battery, your cell phone's heating up, and if you're trying to do this all day, it's not really that convenient. But if I could set a small laptop or a Windows tablet that's plugged in next to me and use that as the controller for all these, then maybe I get a little bit longer use out of it. If I can just leave that on the table and whenever I need to start and stop, I can reach over and hit the button. That's great. If anybody knows better ways to start multiple Panasonic cameras recording than a Wi-Fi tethered app, I would love to hear it from you guys because, IR blasters would be great. Some sort of cabled remote would be awesome. I don't think it supports LARC plugin as far as I know anyway. I don't think that's a thing on any of the consumer grade DSLRs.
Technically, I feel like you could wire up your own infrared receiver. Not that I'm an electrical engineering genius like DJ over there, but considering that the protocol that like the LANC port uses, I figure like a few pieces of solder and, you know, an infrared diode receiver and stuff like that, you could probably set it up so that, hey, when it gets this frequency, it fires off a relay that sends, you know, 1.5 volts or whatever over to the LANC port, which goes, okay, you press the trigger. So like it wouldn't, I don't think anyone's invented that product, but I feel like that's something that you could add on to a camera. For me, the part of it too is the Robocam only supporting 2 cameras, which I get there's limitations to Wi-Fi and everything else. The one other situation I was thinking of this was if per se you set up an entire studio, kind of like a 3-camera studio or 4-camera studio. This would kind of be a way for like one guy to start recording on all of them for backups or later for syncing or something like that, as well as being able to kind of adjust focus and zoom and like have a lot of those controls without having like 3 devices in front of him all tethered to, you know, the 3 cameras. So I could see that being really useful, because I've heard of a few people who use, you know, GH4s for studio use, like for internet studio kind of use and stuff like that, not for necessarily television broadcast or anything. But so I could see it being useful in that niche, but also too, like getting the Wi-Fi networks and set up all that before a shoot, just it seems more trouble than it's worth.
Well, if you're using it in studio for like a broadcast, not necessarily a broadcast, but like a YouTube multicam sort of thing, you could use the YAG whatever grip on the Panasonic, and I believe it accepts control via either HDMI or SDI. So you can send overhead control that way in order to start multiple cameras simultaneously.
That's true.
A lot of switchers are capable of doing that. So that is like a pretty reasonable way if you're doing like stationary cameras set up around the studio and just wiring it in. And I could probably take advantage of something like that if I really wanted to, or I could get really creative and grab a Raspberry Pi and a Wi-Fi tethered device to it and create a hotspot and then attach a button of some kind and like but that's just I'm not going to reinvent the wheel on this. Someone else come up with something good and I'll use it. Trust me. This one actually is something Devin and I were talking about pre-show, and it's kind of interesting, a little topic that I've addressed before, but it's good to talk about again. Devin, you're looking at buying some lenses for your Micro Four Thirds cameras, and you've kind of been rolling around the idea of picking up a 12 to 35 millimeter or a 12 to 40 millimeter lens for your GH3. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. They've, because we talked about, was it last week or the week before, the Panasonics have really gone down in price. That 12 to 35 2.8 has gone down to, used for sometimes under 600, even 550. I've seen it gone used for, as well as a few others. As well as to the Olympus, on the other hand, has kept its value. I mean, both of these lenses were a little over $1,000 when they were coming out, and DJ was talking about them and writing about them on his blog and whatnot. But the Olympus, there's very few of them in the marketplace, and they still go for, I want to say a little over 700, maybe 750, maybe 800, depending on the condition. So I was kind of looking at the Panasonic just because there's a pretty good price gap, and I could make use of the image stabilization because this would be more of a documentary lens for me and less for like a cinematic look or something like that, something that's automatic. The autofocus is fast and works great. And that's what I wanted, is great autofocus and image stabilization. And then DJ just rained on my whole parade by saying that the image stabilization works like crap in 4K. So,
oh, man, you just spoiled my launch. Okay, so here's what I ran into. And I have some Panasonic glass and I have some Olympus glass. Right here is the Olympus 12 to 40 millimeter f2.8. And take a look at this, guys. All metal, real nice and solid, really well built. This one's taken hits from seawater, all kinds of stuff. It also, you can lock in the focus ring, and now you have actual hard stops on your focus, where the Panasonic is fly-by-wire. Really, just Olympus does a good job building their lenses. Now, this thing, super heavy, way heavier than the 12 to 35, and that's an advantage for the 12 to 35. But if you hold the 12 to 35 for Panasonic, it's very plasticky. The build quality is not super solid. And just as an example here, since I have it in front of me, this is the 35 to 100. And, I like this lens. I use it all the time. It's great. And IS does work fairly well on this, but it's not very well built. It's just kind of a cheap feeling.
You like that full metal body. You like that extra weight. I carry around too much crap. I'm trying to find lighter gear, but you like a very strong lens.
Yes. Now, on the other hand, this thing right here, and as well as the 12 to 35 millimeter, the IS, At 1080p, it's not noticeable. You can turn on IS and you're just fine. It stabilizes pretty well. It's good for handheld stuff, and your image looks good. But if you shoot in 4K with IS turned on, I personally have found that it sort of washes out your image a little bit. You sort of get this soft look to everything that you don't normally get with the GH4. Now, I haven't been able to confirm or deny that from anybody else, but in my testing, that's what I see. So I generally keep the IS off on these lenses unless I'm using them for photography. Now, I know that Panasonic lenses are a lot smaller and lighter, and this is a great example of that. This is the 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8, a wide angle lens, and this thing is roughly 3 times the size of the f4 offering from Panasonic. It weighs a lot. It's hefty. I mean, this is actually, it might actually be heavier than my 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 for my Canon glass. So that's crazy to me. And I understand, Devin, completely. Like, it sucks carrying around more weight, and I'm trying to scale down. And in that regard, I think the Panasonic lens wins. The issue for me is just that if you're buying it for the IS, you're kind of, it's not as good of a sell as you think it would be. Do you
think, sure, for a GH4, do you think that maybe the problem, the reason why it gets softer is because of the very, I don't know how to say, audacious rolling shutter in 4K mode? Because I know that the 4K mode on the GH4 has a lot more rolling shutter than the 1080p mode from the tests I've seen. And so I'm guessing that maybe it's that rolling shutter, it's that motion, and so then it softens up because it's just kind of generally a little slower to update.
I mean, it could be, man.
Possibly. Well,
that's speculation. I personally, I think that because the spinning portion of the image stabilization system is so close to the body, and the body and the lens are so small and lightweight, it actually sort of shakes the camera body while it's shaking the lens. Whereas the IS system in a full frame camera is sort of towards the balancing point of the lens itself. The lenses from Panasonic are so light and so lightweight that the IS actually, you can kind of feel the camera just a little bit sort of shaking. And that shake is enough to me to make it soft. Now, is it at the end of the world soft? No, it's not. Like, you can still look at the footage and be like, yeah, this looks fine. But when you do just a test to switching it off and then switching back on, switching it off and switching back on again, and you look at your footage, you're like, wait a minute, what just happened right there? And you can see it. But if you shoot with just IS on all the time, you're probably not going to be that concerned with it. And honestly, it was kind of a linchpin for me, but for everybody else, it's not. The other thing I really like about the Olympus glass is, again, you know, I like having hard stops on my lens. The fly-by-wire stuff is fine, but, you know, this guy feels a lot better in my hand personally. And Olympus usually adds in this programmable button that doesn't work with Panasonic stuff. So don't even worry about the button. Never mind.
Speaking of Olympus, they're coming out with a few lenses, right?
Oh, yeah. We've got the way to transition, Devin, man. Spoiling it by pointing it out. Okay, so we've also got the Olympus 30mm or 300mm f4 on the horizon. This beauty has been kind of sitting around and waiting to be released for, I think, since 2015 or 2014 is when they started talking about that. That was actually
it's a pro lens.
Yeah, it is. And that was in the same announcement time as this what is it, 7 to 14 millimeter f2.8 that I'm holding up right now. This actually did finally make it out. Great lens, love it, by the way. But this guy here is, it's an f4 across the board. It's and by across the board, I mean it's it's 300 millimeter. So it's just it's a really big zoom lens prime. Now, why wouldn't you just get this guy right here? This is the 40.
There's no image stabilization, man. There's no image stabilization.
It's true. But note the shoe on the bottom.
Well, but to me, with f4, I feel like f4 is the area where image stabilization can become very helpful, not just because you're telephoto, but trying to take pictures with a longer shutter with telephoto, the image stabilization, because when you're in darker scenes and stuff like that, and f4 is as far as you go, and you're trying to brighten up the scene by opening up the shutter for longer, image stabilization can be really helpful to get you that extra stop of light that you need to really make the photo work. So I think it's going to come out for about $2,000 or so. I'm not completely sure on that. I think that's projected or estimated, but I feel like people who do photography of birds, it is weird to have a 300 prime though, right? Because
so
usually your telephotos are a zoom because you're going to do bird watching or something like that. You're going to do something where you're far away from an object, and using your feet to change your focal length isn't really an option, because changing from say 150 to 200 is like a lot to walk that distance to change that framing. So
well, and that's the thing about the 40 to 150 is with the 1.4x adapter on this, you're basically getting a 112 to 420 millimeter full frame equivalent. So that seems like enough reach as is. And with 1.4x, you're losing about a stop. So you're going from like f2.8 to f4. So now this is about the same category, and it's a zoom has a zoom range to it. So you have a little bit more use out of it. I mean, you can go take your multiplier off and you can shoot at 40 to 150. You can put your multiplier on. You can shoot the birds if you want. And I don't know, to me, if you're going to use something like this would be for, I suppose, sports, or, animal photography, or I can't really think personally any video applications that I would just be jonesing for a 300 millimeter prime. Can you?
No, because it isn't a zoom, and it just seems so weird. I feel like I pull that photo up and start to be like, okay, how am I going to create my composition? And then be like, oh, well, this isn't necessarily as wide as I want it to be, or like as close as I want it to be. And I feel like just a lot of walking, because it's just, it feels like there's so much walking you'd have to do to get the framing you want, because 300 is just kind of, it's really long, because it's equivalent of like 600. It's almost a telescope, it's basically binoculars. Yeah. And that kind of works, but then it limits you creatively in terms of like trying to frame your photos, just because you're usually going to take pictures of things far away that you don't have control over. So being able to zoom is really important. So it's a little bit of a strange lens, but maybe, optically it performs better than you with a 2x converter on it, and the image stabilization may be like really killer for something like this.
Yeah, and those are both probably true, especially if you start getting into the higher megapixel count, like the GX8, where it's a 20 megapixel sensor as opposed to a 16 megapixel sensor. Honestly, for me, I use this to stay out of the action, but get the shot as though I was close to the action. Now, a lot of times when I'm shooting gore effects or anything that shoots out blood and guts, any kind of spray you want to stay camera clear from. And I do have like a glass enclosure for the camera to protect it, but when you see something hit that, it kind of takes you away from the whole scene. So a lot of times if I'm doing special effects shots, practical special effects, I like to use this guy or the 70 to 200 and back as far away as I can and still get a full frame of whatever's going on. 600 though, because this is a 300, so 600 equivalent. I mean, man, you're gonna have to be way out there. It's just, I don't know, $2,000 too is a pretty big investment for Micro Four Thirds stuff. I think I spent $1,200 with the multiplier on this guy. So, far more usable for me personally. I'm sure there are definitely some applications for this. We've probably spent too much time talking about this.
Yeah, we probably have.
All right, moving on down the line. We've got a few cool things here, and this is actually one of them. And let me bring this up because I'm holding too many lenses right now. Look at this. Okay, this is a gun attachment for the Olympus Air. And if you're not familiar with the Olympus Air, we've talked about it a few times. It's a very tiny, cute little Micro Four Thirds camera that basically has a 16 megapixel sensor inside of a tiny body. People have been 3D printing various types of containers for this little guy. And this is mine right here. It has a little flip out to hold your cell phone. You can extend that, and a single button on the top. You can pretty much build whatever you want for this. And they actually have sort of an open standard for the housing. So you can go to Olympus and get the specs for this particular mount and build whatever you want to twist it in, lock it into place. So the gun thing's not that exciting for me, but there are,
You don't like it?
yeah, I mean, what do I need, like a little snub-nosed gun-looking thing to shoot photos with? Because, you know, I haven't really been using this much for video, but it's cool. It's interesting. I think the more interesting thing are some of the other adapters, and I can put some of those in the show notes, but this right here, if you look on the back, is basically the screw-in portion. It attaches like so. You can use that to adapt this to an actual camera body. That's kind of interesting with the cell phone holder. They've got metal versions of that. A few different flavors are available online from Japan and China. They're definitely cool, but in the end, I think you're trying to turn this into this, and it's really not the same thing. You know, the Olympus Air is great for what it is, something really tiny that I can shoot full photos as though I were working with a GH4 using my cell phone and using interchangeable lenses. So that's really the sweet spot. If you start trying to turn this into a actual full-fledged camera, you're going to fail because, you know, you got lag, you got all the other things that are associated with that. For using your cell phone via Wi-Fi connection. I mean,
and well, if you're going to build it out and make it bigger and start taking up more space, it's almost like, you know, there's like a G7 option. There's like a lot better options for this exact situation. The Air is supposed to be all about that small size, and just, you know, because of small size, convenience of always having it on you. And if you're, you know, going to build it out and start making, like, try to kind of turn it into a DSLR kind of a thing, it's like, well, it's going to stink because, you know, there's way better options for the same price as an Air.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one of the things I am excited about, and I'm on this Kickstarter, mine's supposed to be delivered coming fairly soon, the E1 camera, which is basically a Pansonic GH4 sensor shoved into a tiny body about the size of the Olympus Air. This actually has a monitor built in, a low resolution, like GoPro style monitor. It has controls for the camera and everything else. So you do get that kind of instant control. This guy is probably, and I'm looking through, let's see, I think they have some pictures of it, survey. Oh, yeah, I don't want to share my address with you guys. Oh, all right. Well, anyway, the point I'm getting at is that's more along the lines of like an all-in-one type of device. I was hoping that the Olympus Air would be that for me, but what it turns out to be is just the emergency camera that I throw into my backpack when I'm traveling. And if nothing else, I have it there to put a lens on. What I've really ended up doing is I thought this would be the camera I always carried with me, but the Olympus or the Panasonic LX100 has become like my ultimate travel camera because I don't even have to carry a lens with that guy.
Yeah, and it's just super compact. You can't beat the compactness you get from something that is, you know, I guess you call it a point and shoot kind of camera, because those lenses, they always, you know, the way they build the sensor and the lens is all integrated together. You can't get a smaller package than that. So for something they always keep in your pocket, while, you know, people brag about the quality of their DSLRs, those are the kind of cameras you can always have on you as a point and shoot. So, and I've been jealous of your LX100.
Yeah, I've talked a number of photographers into shooting with the LX100. A couple of people I know have decided that maybe they don't need to carry their 24-70 and 5D Mark II around anymore because it's just such a pain in the butt. So
yeah, no, for sure. And the quality on it's really great. And so for moving on, because we're gonna run out of time because we have too many stories on here. I threw in real quick, Wipster did a huge change to their pricing. If you don't remember, Wipster was one of the websites I mentioned about uploading your footage to a place where everyone can look at it, make comments that fit time markers and everything else. And Wipster went ahead and made unlimited storage. It's still, but Wipster was one of the ones I was most interested in because their pricing was very low for small teams and whatnot. It's $15 per user per month, but it's unlimited, you know, sharing per se with however many people you want. So you could just sign up for one account, send it to a bunch of people to comment on. It's only the advanced features of being able to like manage how many revisions there are and all kinds of stuff like that, to-do list that you would want to set up a second account. So from when I last used this, you could just sign up for $15 a month and start using this to send to clients and get feedback from your clients on it. They don't need to, sign up for anything necessarily, but I turned away from it because they had time limits on their footage. So I think it was something like, 15 minutes, but they're like, hey, you could take off a video and that would like free up time and then upload a different video. But I was like, 15 minutes is way too short. There's, sometimes I shoot a concert or something like that. It's more than an hour long. So I always shied away from it. But now they're removing all of those limits for storage. So it's just $15 and you can upload as much as you want, share it with people. It's also kind of nice too, because there's a few people, unfortunately, who you trust too much, and I share something on YouTube and they actually then rip it and upload it to Facebook, because that's relatively easy to do, right? Going through, of course, watermarking is always a good idea if you don't have something in a contract for damages or penalties. But so websites like this, just because they're different, there aren't automatic tools, on Firefox or Google Chrome to rip videos off of these websites. And they tend to do pretty okay on making sure that like no generic ways of kind of cutting through the code can you grab one of these things. I'm not saying it's impervious. I'm just saying that it makes it harder than just one click. So most of your clients would have a harder time trying to, steal your footage, not pay for it or whatever. So that's one of the reasons to use a site like this, as well as it's kind of a cool way to get notes and stuff like that. I think it works best really though if you're with a team of people, a production team or something, where people are actually going to comment with time markers. There's going to be revisions and you're going to go through a process. Most clients are basically just going to look at the time code you print at the bottom and write back where they want their changes done. But I think for short films or stuff like that, it can definitely be useful if that's how the entire team likes to work. It depends on what workflow works for you. So real quick, just wanted to mention that DJ doesn't use any of this. He probably just uploads to Dropbox and has a client view it from there. And
actually, my trick is I upload it in the lowest res 720p I can kick out, basically like a 2 meg encoding stream, and then put it on Google Drive and let them watch it from there. That way, if they steal it, that's fine. If they try to use it for anything, it's going to look awful. It has a watermark on it, deal with it. And then I do basically Hangouts in order to do live edit changes. So I've over the last 6 months or 8 months, I've kind of fallen in love with Hangouts as a method for working with clients as well as co-editors and producers to kind of clean things up, because there's nothing better than having the person there watching alongside you as you edit, saying like, this is the section right here in my notes that I want this change. You show them the change, they're like, no, that's not quite what I was thinking. And then you fuss around a little bit more, show them again. And it's really nice, especially if you're in like a remote situation where they're not in the same room as you or the same state as you or anything else. So
sure.
Really love that.
Hangouts is great. And I used Skype for a long time. Hangouts is great too. I'm big into all that stuff. But moving along,
kind of got unreliable after a while. All right, sorry, man. Go to the multicam thing. You want to talk about this? You're excited about it. I am not.
Yeah, of course.
The Apollo.
The Apollo. They came out with a portable multi-input capture device. It looks a bit, it's a bit like these Shoguns and these ninjas and whatnots.
Looks like the Odyssey.
What's interesting about this one is that it'll take 4. It'll do 4 ProReses. I mean, we're talking 1080p here. We're not talking 4K, but it'll do 4 simultaneously. And it'll record a 5th stream of you live cutting those 4 streams. So while this is a little niche, when you consider, let's say, somebody wanted a live shoot of or live recording of, say, a concert, a reality show, something like that, normally you'd capture it all, and then in post you'd watch the whole thing, 2 hours long, whatever it is, and you cut it and you put it together, and that's that. This can greatly speed up production because you can cut on the fly while it's happening, whether a director, tech director, whatever is there, can actually cut on the fly, and now your 5th stream kind of acts as, you can lay them on the timeline. They'll all sync up perfectly because they all started and stopped at the same time. And then you can, just fix your little, mess ups in the cut or whatever else, or things that you need to work around after the fact. And the fact that it's $4,000 seems a little bit pricey, but like when you consider if you wanted to get the cheapest Blackmagic 4K or the Blackmagic 1080p switcher they make, which I think is about a little under maybe $1,800.
Yeah.
And then you take advantage of that. You want to record each stream by itself in ProRes. That's like, you know, 2 hyperdecks, dual hyperdecks, or it's like 4 of the cartridge looking hyperdeck things. And then on top of that, you power the whole thing, and it's like, holy crap, that is a lot of money. You're spending probably close to about $6 or $7 grand, and you have a really big cumbersome solution. Now, if you're doing like on-the-fly switching and you need graphics and everything else, then yeah, you need that. But this is a situation where if you're going to know that it's you work in a field where you're going to edit later all the time, and you're not going live to a sat truck or something like that, this is really cool, just because no one's ever made a product like this. This is by itself in the marketplace, because it gives you that portability. It'll save you time in post, and just, you know, the fact that you get so much in a package, because you are getting 4 recorders, you're getting a switched view, and everything else, and it's all ProRes, you know, HQ or whatever you need, 444. So all those things combined together, I thought it was really cool, because as far as I've seen, no one's ever made a product like this. So I know this isn't useful for everyone, probably especially not people who are in live production, because they need a little bit more serious tools when it comes to switching. But it's one of those tools that is like surprisingly cheap for how much they give you, and I'm sure that there's a good number of people out there who is like, this is the perfect thing that's going to change the way we shoot every day. So it's exciting to see.
Now, when you're doing your live cuts on this, is it generating any kind of metadata that you could drop into like Premiere or something like that in order to, you know, do your multicam edits in post?
As far as I saw, it was just, it was more just you would look at that video feed, because that 5th video feed is just going to show you all the cuts as it happens. As far as I saw, there wasn't any metadata. I didn't see any time code stuff or anything like that. I think that the workflow is just built where you lay down camera 5 per se as your master, and then cameras 1, 2, 3, and 4 you layer on top. And whenever you need to fix a cut, you just cut out which camera you want it to go over it. So I don't think that they really built any syncing into it from what I saw. Not that I've used it, but from what I saw. And I feel like they probably think it's not necessary, because if you're using the tool this way, then you don't care about syncing, because as soon as you hit record, everything's in sync. So
now, what about controls? Are there any buttons or maybe like a fader interface that you can use on the fly, like a regular studio control setup that you can plug into this guy? Because I mean, really, if you're just like simple cuts back and forth, you're kind of crippling yourself, where you'd want to have a little bit of control over like fades and transitions and so on.
As far as I saw, I didn't see anything about fades or anything. Yeah, I feel like you're going to do all that stuff in post. And that's why I said this doesn't exactly seem like for something that's live. If it's live, you're going to want a lot more control. But this is something that when you want to go to post and you want to kind of skip whatever it may be, the first 2 hours of editing where you're just doing a basic cut of all of the cameras, this can go ahead and save you a crap ton of time. But yeah, I mean, besides the usual, no gen locks required. It's got HDMI output too if you want to kick it out to something else. It's a 7.7-inch OLED screen, and you know it's only a little under £1.50. So
that's a lot of power in a single box.
It is, and I saw USB. For some reason, I can't find anyone who mentioned how you would interface with it, but I saw USB on it, and so I imagine you're going to hook up either a specific device by them, or there's a few devices that, you know, you can program HID compatibility. I forget what one of them was, but it's like a row of 16 buttons you can buy for about $100, and you can pull the caps off of them and label them. They're backlit, and I can't remember what the company is that makes them. They also make shorter versions of it as well. But I see people use it all the time in studios, because you can like just stick this row of buttons underneath monitors and run the USB inside to control like a computer, control like a Blackmagic switcher. You can program them for anything. So I'm sure something like that is what you'd interface with this in order to run it. But I mean, also too, like, I get that it's super portable, but it seems kind of silly because in their promo images, they mount it on top of a like an Area Alexa. Like, I don't know, like it's going to be plugged in there and then someone's going to stand next to the camera and switch it. Like, you could do that. I just don't think that would be a great workflow. You think you'd put in like a Video Village or something, but still, in any case, It seems super interesting. It's supposed to be a decent monitor too, because you're gonna have your false color focus assist, histogram, you know, zooms and everything else.
You might be able to do like a really quick and dirty TriCaster type of setup with something like this, you know, because you already have the cameras there. You can bring your audio in that way, and on your final stream out, you can do your overlays. So for a really simple live event, I mean, seriously, a single source and then picking up your audio from every person on a camera, that's pretty simple to do. I would be interested to know what the audio mixdown and submixdown path is through each of those channels back to the master track, or if it's just like cutting out one and going to the other and cutting out the other. That might be difficult, but
still, it's interesting. I haven't found enough information on it, but I can tell by what they're making that I can think of a few people who this would have really helped them out on a couple of shoots. And this would really change some people's workflows in the way that they get production done every day.
All right, last thing on the list here, and I'm going to skip the hacking your camera thing, but I'll leave that in the show notes if anybody wants to check that out. It's a really cool putting a CPU cooler on your sensor, your camera, in order to get like high-res space
or
shots.
Scratching off your sensor.
Yeah, good luck with that. Anyway, Varavon, one of my favorite camera cage manufacturers, and not a sponsor of the site, by the way, but this is a Varavon cage that I'm actually using on my GH4. Use it all the time. Freaking love that thing. Is having a sale, 30% off of most of their rigs. Also, they've got a bunch of different things on sale right now for the master cage for the Sony A7S that has the cheesy obligatory wood attached to it, all the way down to the regular black finished 5D Mark III and GH4 cages. So swing over to that, check it out. I've got a link to the GH4 cage that I use regularly. Love that guy. One of the best cages available, in my opinion, for the GH4. Really great form factor. Has lots of mounts, the nice handle on the top that I don't have on here right now, as a bunch of audio stuff that I keep permanently attached to that. Great stuff. But otherwise, Varavon, great cage company. As for their other equipment, you know, not so familiar with it. But Devin, you got anything to add to that?
No, I wanted to ask, do you use that rail attachment that goes in the bottom corner?
No, absolutely not. That is weird and wacky and not my thing.
Different. It's way different. Do you ever use rails? I know you're not a rig guy. I know you're really not a shoulder rig guy, but do you ever use rails? You ever pop on a follow focus?
I do, mostly on my 5D Mark III. With the GH4, I find that for the most part, unless I'm adapting some kind of lens or I'm using something like, man, I just have all the lenses on my desk today, like this Voigtlander right here, where it actually works well with a follow focus. Most of the electronic controlled lenses available for a GH4 don't really work well with a follow focus. So it's not really
it's all by wire.
Yeah, exactly. So, you know, if I'm using a set of Voigtlanders on my GH4, that's fine. I'll put some rails underneath of it. And I actually have an extension plate for, I think D focus is the follow focus I have in my collection, with the 0.8 millimeter or 0.8 pitch Cinella gears, all that crap. I have a whole set of that for all of my lenses. And I use that when I need to. And I use it with the 5D Mark III when I have manual focus lenses. But otherwise, I'm pretty lazy. Like if I need to pull focus, I pull focus like this, and I make sure to only do it one direction in a given shot. So that way I'm not having to worry about like getting back to a marker point. If I really am going to sit through a scene and have to go back and forth and back and forth and pull focus a lot, I will get my follow focus app. I will create correct marks on my marking sheet, and I will go back to each of those points again and again. But really, I don't know. That's just an extra step, especially you've seen the one that they have on the Varavon site. And actually I can bring this up so everybody can see what I'm talking about. This is sort of silly because it's just this extra bit of stuff sticking out the side right here. You can see this, and you can attach a follow focus to that, but it's a single attachment point. So if either the connection point rolls or the follow focus attachment point rolls, you're gonna like kind of sweep out from there. So it's not a super solid connection. You're pushing it up against the gear, and then on top of that, for the GH4, you know, that whole thing isn't really, there isn't a ton of applications for that unless you have 100% adapted lenses, like say you're shooting on FD lenses the entire time, or you have some weird C-mount lenses that you're using all the time, anything with a really good follow focus turning range that you really do need to use a follow focus on. Otherwise, focusing, whatever, it's not really a thing for me. Now, sure. On the other hand, I do have a dedicated set of rails and I don't have a matte box because I think matte boxes are, well, my opinion on matte boxes, but
yep, we all know.
Yeah, we've all gone through this before, but I do throw rails on there when I'm using manual focus lenses, and it's really great with, like, I have some old primes. For example, I'll throw rails on my Sony A7S when I'm shooting with the 55mm f1.2 FD lens from Canon's old collection. That's a beautiful, sort of has its own feel lens, and it works great with a follow focus system, and that's the type of lens I would want to use for that. The Voigtlanders are another example. These are great. They have good throw. They work well with a follow focus. And if I had a set of cinema primes from Rokinon or something like that had the gears built in, that would probably also be handy. But again, that's not a lens I would want to stick on my GH4 just because they're freaking huge. That's a lens you want to use for your Canon 5D Mark III. So I don't find myself using rails almost at all on the GH4 period, but I do use rails on the 5D Mark III and to a lesser extent the Sony A7S. Actually, I would reverse that. I'd say nowadays I use more rails on my A7S simply because I'm adapting more lenses. I don't have any native Sony glass. So for what it's worth, that's where I'm at. Devin, what about you? I know you have your giant lunchbox rig.
Yeah.
And a few other ones. Are you constantly sticking a follow focus on your rigs to shoot?
You know what? Most of the time I'm not. If it's strange. If it's a shoulder rig, I actually don't use a follow focus. I usually just grab the lens by itself because I'm usually swapping a few too. It's this weird situation where I'm usually using a shoulder rig when I'm jumping around and doing a lot of different kinds of shots and different kinds of things where and in that situation, I'm switching lenses so often, I don't really want to bother with the follow focus. And the camera's kind of already stable and where I need it to be. So it's very easy for me to grab it and focus it. But there's a few cases where I know I'm going to run around without a shoulder rig and I want the package to be smaller in my hand. And in that case, I'll throw on rails and I'll throw in a follow focus because that follow focus will become my second point of grip on the camera. So it allows me to grip and focus at the same time. And I kind of like to feel that. I think it's a bit more... for me personally, it makes the camera more stable for me and easier to use. Because holding in my hand and wrapping my hand around it to twist the lens, for some reason that gets awkward for me in the kind of shooting positions I usually end up finding myself. So it's one of those where, yeah, if I'm not running a shoulder rig, I usually have a follow focus on it. If I am running a shoulder rig, like I know where the camera's going to be and I can hold the entire thing with one hand very stable. And so I'll just use my other hand to wrap around the camera. So each to their own. I mean, and there's been times too where I've gone out shooting and I have a matte box and I've had to use it because one time I was shooting with a Rokinon 8mm, which you can't attach any filters to.
Yeah.
And I was shooting raw on the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera out at noon, which you can't adjust the ISO down or anything like that, or the ASA on a when you're shooting raw. It's 800. It's the native of the sensor. 400. It's native of the sensor. So in that case, and I couldn't get my filters on it because it's a big bulbous lens or whatever, the 8mm 3.5 or whatever it is. So in that case, yeah, there's times where I use my matte box. Sometimes I get shadowing issues too, and I wish I would bring my matte box. I usually just end up using my hand, which sounds weird. It's one of those where it works. And I can see now why so many photographers really like that gooseneck flap, like French flag thing that they've got that they attach to their cold shoe.
If you don't like lens flare, that thing's very handy.
Well, or if you like contrast too, dude, it's a lot of the time it's not necessarily net lens flare.
Shoot into the sun. I mean,
if you've got small spectaculars and stuff like that, lens flare is fine and it's a pretty thing and everything else. If you're shooting out with the sun, and even like today, I was shooting this morning. I was shooting wedding dresses with an 85mm Rokinon on the GH3, and I was just taking photos. But even with the giant long lens hood that comes with the Rokinon 80mm, The sun was still, I mean, I'm way up in the northern hemisphere like DJ. The sun is still kind of low in the sky. It's not high noon. And so because it's a bit lower, it hits that angle just right. And even though I got a big lens hood on it, I'm still finding myself trying to cover it up to increase the contrast, because it ends up just washing over and bleaching the entire photo basically.
Yeah, that hasn't been enough of an issue for me to really worry about, but I shoot indoors a lot, and when I do shoot outdoors, it's usually in the wee hours of the morning or the towards dusk time, because those are the sweet times to shoot outside. I do have one other thing, and I did see this on set the other day, and it kind of caught me off guard. I laughed out loud when I saw it, and then I was like, wait a minute, what's this about? And if you just really need to pull focus fast, they're really cheesy, but they're fun, and they're like $20. It's just a little strap-on stick, basically, for your focus ring on your lens, and a marker board that goes behind it. $25 gets you this. You mark the spots that you're trying to get back to. Obviously, this 28 to 135 lens that they're demonstrating here is probably not going to have repeatable focus on it. So that may be a waste of your $25.
They're trying to make it easier to use. I kind of remember, I want to say this was about 6 years ago, this was the thing to have in terms of cheap follow focus, because back then there wasn't $100 follow focus units. So people, now this has kind of grown up a bit and become like its own actual product, but I remember it was a thing to go grab, I forget what it was. It was like a jar opener or something like that.
This guy right here. So this is the professional version of it. But it's basically like it was sold for elderly ladies, and you used it in order to basically attach to the top of a jar or lid that you couldn't open, and then you would squeeze down on it and then use that as like leverage point. And people would actually attach that to their camera lens.
You can see frequently bought together that spider rig that both me and you had at one point, and the and some other DSLR gear. So you can tell this company's in the DSLR market. They didn't even know it. That $50 follow focus, I've never used one, but I've always wanted one because that looks really cost effective. They've got two kind of versions, one where it gears up into the lens like that, and another one where it uses like a rubber band or something like that, uses some kind of combination. I always thought that was really interesting. Obviously, it's not as flexible as having one that you spin forward, because that one eventually the camera or the rails will get into the way. It depends on how much play you have in your focus, which I think for most photography glass, you won't have that problem using something like that. But if you have cinema glass, which tends to be the kind of glass that's geared, that thing might be a problem, because those things usually almost do a full rotation. So,
yeah, and I didn't find myself using my defocus follow focus system. I think I have version 3 or version 4, and I've had it forever. Love it to death, and it's got an extender that'll go up past a battery grip and so on. Really good stuff, but I just don't use it that much. And I do see the point of having a follow focus. I understand that there are probably a lot more professional people than myself that use them continuously. It's just I don't really have time to sit there and pull focus on a regular basis. And in some cases, I've even gotten to the point where I just program in focus points that are repeatable. Hit the button and it goes to one. Hit the button, it goes to the other, and I don't worry about it. And I find myself doing that in Magic Lantern more often than I do pulling focus, because look, I just need to transition between these 2 points, and I need to transition at such a speed, and that's it. And I can figure that out. Okay, click, bam, done. Click again, done. Sweet. Yeah. Now on to the next shot. Don't have to worry about it. And it used to be that when we first got shallowed up the field, everybody was like, oh man, we got to use it on everything and really pull focus all the time and stuff. But now it's almost become passe to continually, like, it's the mark of a new DSLR shooter to go out and you see them like, oh, every shot is shallowed up the field. Every single shot is pulling focus from one item to another. Every single shot is the entire background in bokeh. I mean, it looks good, don't get me wrong, but you got to do other things too.
No, and that's a good point. Like today when I was shooting the wedding dresses, it's one of those where you need to, so many people are like shallowed up the field, they feel like it builds depth. And most of the time they're right. It's understandable why they think that. So in one situation, I've got, the subject a few feet away from a tree, and I slam it all the way open at, T 1.5. And, we get this nice kind of shallow depth of field with, the tree being slightly out of focus. Now we went over to an open field. So it's just like this openness and this sky and like trees along the side and a little bit of this valley going on. And if I do T1.5, the background just becomes a matte painting. It just it gets super flat and you don't see any depth because your brain can't perceive that. It just looks like a blur of colors, like someone just pulled a backdrop behind your subject. And so you're actually losing a sense of depth in that photo and you're losing the grandeur and everything else. So when I got to that photo, I stopped it up to, I think, about T12 or something like that. It's still, I wanted it out of focus. I wanted to separate my subject, but I wanted to show how deep the valley was and how far away the trees were and everything else. And you lose a sense of distance and of size when you just do, the shallowest thing that you can do. So, but hey, everyone learns. I mean, that's where everyone starts. We all grabbed our DSLRs the first day we got them, and we shot like that for weeks on end before, we started to have different tastes and stuff like that. So, and it's understandable because every cell phone everyone's used, every video camera everyone's used, and everything else has never been capable of that. So as soon as you get that new toy, that's exactly what you want to do with it, is what you've never been able to do.
It's the slider syndrome, man. As soon as someone gets a slider, like
slider
they just get sliders in every single shot. You got to think about what you're trying to imply with your shot. You got to kind of put it together, and you got to understand that not everything needs to be out of focus. And actually, one of the things that I love about the A7S is in low light, I can still stop down to f4 or f5.6 and get special effects that I'm shooting in a darker setting in focus so that you can see the gore dripping out of something, or you can see the jaw being ripped off. And this is getting a little too gruesome, but
it's Halloween. You're allowed to.
Yeah, exactly. Happy Halloween. Actually, I grabbed this Halloween hat to wear for the show, but then I remembered I wear headphones. So not a thing at all. All right. On that note, we've gone long enough, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Devin, where can people find you, man?
You can find me at Twitter at DevoCut. Where you can talk to me and ask me questions, and I'll pretend like I know something.
On that note, guys, thanks for listening and watching to another exciting episode of DSLR Film Noob Podcast. This was episode 62. We are still strong and moving forward, so send your comments, questions, complaints, and concerns to us. We would love to hear them, listen to them, and not listen to them if they're in the complaint format. But hey, guys, it's great interacting with you. Make sure you like, subscribe, do all those things that you're supposed to do with online content. And we will see you next time on another episode of the podcast. Talk to you next time. Make your face. And that's it for the podcast. YouTube listeners are still out there. Audio listeners have just been shut off the stream. Anything else you want to cover, Devin, before we get out of here, man?
Yeah, I didn't realize you took out my battery story. No, I'm joking.
I mean, you're right. Mounting battery system.
There's been tons of those. Well, and it's not a story yet. I'll bring it back around once they come out the price, because if they're like, hey, $300, I'll be like, screw you, man. That's way too much for something like that.
No,
I mean, sure, doesn't matter. No. Because like I said, I'll bring it back around once there's a price. If there's a decent price, it's worth talking about. If they're asking $300, which I imagine they might, because they think they have a really innovative product, then I'll be like, no, because for $300, I can just get an ordinary gold mount. So why would I get your specialized thing that like kind of only works with you? So
yeah, I think Aperture as well as maybe even Varavon have a format of that, which is just a rail mounted battery. And for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, Devin and I had in the show notes a rail mounted battery system that was basically a barrel plug on one side and allowed you to go to a battery dummy adapter for like a 5D Mark III or something like that. There's a bunch of different flavors out there, and right now a lot of them, and Devin's actually sharing the picture. Let me go to Devin right here. It's this adapter right here, and you can see that it's basically a grip that slides onto your rails and then provides battery power and then is self-charging. Looks like they're using, what is that, a D?
It's just a D-tap, yeah.
Yeah, D-tap. So, you know, it's a thing, but they also, you can go on eBay and you can buy those Sony FP battery adapters that have a D-tap as well.
Well, and for me, For me, like I said, it would only be worthwhile for the price, because if it was, I mean, if this thing was under $100, then it'd be like, yeah, that's a really interesting product. Because to be honest, you don't need a swappable gold mount for DSLR rigs because they don't use that much power. You'll get 12 hours out of one of those, 100-watt batteries. So really, you only need one. And if you can get this cheaper and it attaches to your rig, and I like the way that it attaches fairly low profile, like it sits deep in the rails. So you could kind of use it as like on the back for counterweight or something like that. Or just in general, it's a small thing. All the other rail mounted battery options I've not liked. I've seen them. They all look cheap. I don't like them. But this seemed like something interesting. Once again, though, if their price is going to be like $300 for the 75 watt, I'll be like, no, I'll just buy the Sony MP batteries. I'll buy the adapter for like $20 and just make my own. It may be not as clean as neat, and it may not be as like rugged, but I'm not going to spend that much for a battery because batteries only last so long.
Yeah. Now I'm trying to remember who made it, but there was another battery system that was basically just a giant battery, and the battery was it had a 1/4-20 thumb screw on the top and on the bottom, and you could either thumb screw it to the bottom of your camera, thumb screw it to any part of your cage, rack, or rails, and it was like a 8,000 or a 12,000
it was just like a
battery.
black box, right?
Yeah, and it just had some barrel plugs, a USB port, and some other random bits, and a voltage tap, and you could go to pretty much any camera body you wanted, and they were like $180. I want to say who made the monitors, the very first HD monitors that were available. Not small HD. Dang it, this is driving me crazy. I used to own like 3 of them way back in the day. The very first, they were made for cars, and then they sold them for DSLR market, but you had to modify them and buy your own battery and strap them onto the back. I have tutorials on this.
I don't know. LAN part?
No. DSLR monitor. Dang it. Okay. Voltrox, Cam, Lilliput.
That's right. Okay.
Lilliput. Okay, so Lilliput had a battery for a while that was like a giant screw-on battery, and I don't know if they still make it. And now I'm looking desperately. Battery.
I'm sure they do. The adapters you're talking about, you can even find nowadays for like 113 for like a V mount or gold mount. Yeah. Where it's got a voltage divider, so it'll give you like 5 or 7 voltages for whatever camera you got. You'll find them for 150 and less, depending on how cheap you want to go on the build quality.
Yeah, and I'm looking right now, and there's a ton of barrel plug style, just Sony FP970 battery adapters, but I'm not finding the one I'm thinking of. It was here. Wait a minute, is this it? No, that's not it. This is bad radio.
Yep, terrible radio.
All right.
Well, right now we have viewers. Actually, we have viewers. A terrible viewership.
You guys are suffering through this as Devin and I just like banter back and forth and search through Amazon to find the thing I'm thinking.
Watch us as we search eBay and Amazon for stuff we don't know.
No, I know that it exists, but the difference is that one was they used the cells from a laptop battery and they just stacked them. And then they tapped them off wherever. So it wasn't like your traditional lithium ion setup. It was a maximum, I think it's 17 volts or 14.4 volts. And then you could go down from there, but it was tapped off of those in series parallel configurations. So if you used the 5 volt or 7.2 volt output, you actually got more capacity because it was, it was paralleling the batteries, as opposed to a lot of those, the cheaper ones are using regulators in order to accommodate the voltage steps that you need, or they're only using half the batteries. But it was wired up, and I think that was the trick, was that it was wired up series parallel, so that the 7.2 volt tap for like Canon batteries was using all 14 batteries, but it was putting those batteries in a series parallel configuration, so it doubled your capacity for amp hour rating at that voltage. And if anybody figures out what the hell I'm talking about,
they last, and these things last all day. You can get a 95 watt for $150, and that'll take your DSLR, your monitor, your external recorder, and an LED light for like 10 or 12 hours.
Yeah. The problem is though, like V-Lock is so expensive, man. Like even Anton Power is fairly spendy. You're talking $350 to $400 for the batteries. And then the chargers are going to be another couple $100, if not more, depending on whether you're buying real ones.
The trick is you just get a charger with a D-tap. And you just charge it through the D-tap.
Instead of buying one of those like suitcase double handle type deals.
Yeah. I mean, because you're right. If you're a professional and you're like going to get the right tools for the job, that's how you do it. If you're a DSLR guy and you're only going to have one battery, some of these Chinese manufacturers like Landpart will sell you an adapter, basically a laptop adapter that goes to a D-tap, and that gives it the 14 volts, and it'll charge it off of that. And then the way that they get around, like, how is it done when it's charging, is they build the charging unit in the battery itself, because that's kind of a gold mount V-mount standard, is that like it regulates its own charging and discharging.
Yeah.
So then it just has an LCD screen that tells you when it's charged on the battery itself. So it's just as simple as long as you give this battery 14 volts, it'll take it, it'll charge it, and then it'll stop when it's done on its own, rather than relying on a complex charger like the other stuff that you're talking about, the suitcases and whatnot. So,
man, I'm looking right now, and V-Lock has come down quite a bit from the last time I looked at this. Last time I had to use V-Lock
V-Lock's
batteries,
the cheaper one. V-Lock's the cheaper one. A lot of the professionals in the broadcast industry hate V-Lock. They don't use it.
What's the complaint, I guess?
It falls out. Apparently it just doesn't secure as tight. And even though you may not be inverting your mount that often or anything like that, it's just one of those that it seems like a good mount and it seems strong. But then when you bounce your rig around or you bounce it around in the car or something like that, it becomes dislodged. And so they've all switched over to the gold mount, because the gold mount is rock solid. The gold mount is very tough. And so CBS, NBC, and I think Fox are all gold mount. I think CNN may be V mount. I'm not sure on that one. I mean, don't quote me on any of this, because it kind of changes when you go to the local markets and everything else. But
yeah,
for the most part, when you see all the people lining up and filming the president or whatever else like that, they're all using gold mounts on their cameras. Because when you buy those Sonys or Panasonics, I mean, Sony's the V mount. But all those cameras, you can just unscrew the back plate and wire in whatever plate you want on the back of those. So even when they buy Sony cameras, they'll just unscrew the V mount, screw in an Anton Bauer, and then just run golds the entire time. So
I didn't realize they'd gotten that cheap. I might actually pick up a set. Anytime I really need a ton of battery power, I've rented either Anton Bauer or V-Lock batteries from a rental house.
Well, heck, I mean, too, if you're smart enough to build your own, you can get just a like V-Lock plate for $16 with a red and black wire sticking out of it that you can solder to whatever. So I mean, if you're kind of handy, some of this stuff you can build yourself. You don't need to spend $200 for someone else to make the box that does the conversions and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, but at least companies like Swisstronics are offering up like capacity meters and split batteries and stuff like that. So there are a few innovations available.
Yeah, most of it's been because they need a split lithium ion because of that thermal runaway problem, and all the airlines are scared of it. Like I said, I've never seen it in force, but I guess it's kind of a big deal. So.
All right, well, that was nerding out on batteries.
There you go, yeah.
Supplies, guys. That was your extra bit of live video. I think, Devin, you ready to end the live broadcast, man?
Yes, we can end the live broadcast.
All right, let's kill this dog.